What's up, YouTube? Ryan Panny here. Hope you guys are doing reasonably well. It is time for a review of the new Trivium record, What the Dead Men Say, out this past Friday, April 24th. So there has been a lot of Trivium content on this channel. If you scroll back in the archives, I'm talking like almost 10 years in some cases, you can find me doing covers of the Gunshot to the Head Tribulation solo, the Tread the Flood solo I did. There's a handful of others. Actually, some of them that I did more recently. I just did that video on the top 10 Trivium deep cuts, which was more for the hardcore fans. That was a lot of fun to do. Be sure to check that one out too. Of course, 2.5 years ago, I reviewed Sin in the Sentence, their most recent record. Really excited to tackle this one. This is definitely a band that I know inside and out. I never do these full-length reviews for any band or artist that I don't find myself to be a credible source on, because I couldn't sleep, honestly, if I did that. But in this particular case, there are very few people who know this band as well as I do. And it's really fun to do reviews when your convictions on a particular topic are that deeply rooted. This is a band that's been part of my life since 2006. In regards to the band's last record, The Sin in the Sentence, which came out in late 2017, what's funny is these guys are like in their early 30s. They were practically a boy band when they first came out. So they're relatively young. But it's not inaccurate to call The Sin in the Sentence a latter career revitalization. That's what it was. I mean, following the critically acclaimed career high that was 2008's Shogun, you saw nearly a decade of polarizing releases. 2011's In Waves, which I personally enjoyed. Opinions were very fractured on that. Then you had in 2013 the undeniably stagnant Vengeance Falls. And then after that you had the admirable attempt at a stripped-back classic metal sound on Silence in the Snow, which is an idea that to this day I still support them doing. It just fell way short in execution. They just didn't have the songs to back it up. I mean, think about it. Even if you love In Waves, 6 years without a good album, that's a pretty long time. That is like 3 album cycles in Black Dahlia Murder time. Imagine if Black Dahlia Murder came out with 3 albums in a row that people were disappointed by. So that's a pretty long chapter of the band's career that was full of, I guess, uncertainty for a lot of people. I'm sure for the band's most devoted fans, it didn't really feel like this because they found stuff to like with each release. But all of a sudden you look back and you're like, holy shit, it's 2017. People haven't had a consensus that we've made a good record since 2008. We've been at this for 15 years. My characterization as a latter career revitalization for that record is not that crazy. So at this little valley in the band's career, they bring on board drummer Alex Bent. They vow to make their heaviest, most intricate record yet. And The Sin in the Sentence ends up being this pretty massive second win for the band creatively. It didn't end up unseating my favorites in the band's catalog, but it came pretty damn close. And I don't think anyone would argue with me when I say that some of the band's best songs of their career are on that record. So the big question with What the Dead Men Say becomes, can this newly reinvigorated Trivium maintain the momentum here? Same lineup, same producer, fans chomping at the bit for more, the public opinion for once is on their side again. Seems like they're set up for success, right? That's what I thought, at least. But that narrative pretty quickly unraveled for me. And we'll start specific and then gradually expand our way outward, because I know I'm swimming way upstream with a lot of Trivium fans here. So the first thing that immediately irritated me with this album right out of the gate was the rhythm guitar tone. Right from the very first time I heard the single Catastrophist, and now that I have the whole album in context, it bothers me even more. The guitar tone here sounds really digital. It sounds really sanitized. And I know in times of COVID-19, the word sanitized has taken on a very, very positive connotation, but not in this case. This tone is like an exaggerated, even less visceral version of the Sin in the Sentence guitar tone, which I also was not crazy about, but I tolerated. And the problem for me is a really processed guitar tone creates this like emotional distance between the listener and the anger and the grit that metal guitar is meant to emote a lot of the time. And what ends up happening is parts that could have sounded really, really crushing end up losing their effect. They lose their bluntness. Some examples here of exactly what I'm talking about. The breakdown in Sickness Unto You. The main groove in the title track where the guitars sound really, really trebly and don't really have a kick to them. Amongst the Shadows and the Stones, which, look, I love that song and we'll get to that, but their bridge before that first solo does not hit nearly as hard as it should. That part should crush. And if you want to understand more of what I'm talking about here are a couple points of comparison. I know people don't really like The Crusade, but in terms of guitar tone, listen to pretty much any song on that record, but specifically Becoming the Dragon, Contemporary's Contamination, and Sadness Will Sear, especially To the Rats, which has a lot of thrash bass ideas that are used on this album, so that's a really good point of comparison. Notice how fucking in your face the guitars feel on these songs. They feel like a guitar was just plugged into an amp, shot into Pro Tools, and that was it. They feel alive. They feel like they're attacking you. They feel like they're kind of stabbing at you with each riff. And the In Waves album, that's another interesting point of comparison because the guitars on that album do sound very heavily edited, but they still don't have that inexplicable, kind of robotic layer of separation that you feel as a listener on What the Dead Men Say. It's unfortunate. And I'm not going to blame Josh Wilbur at all, production-wise, because I think the rhythm section on this album sounds fucking great. The mixing and mastering are fine. It's just the guitars that I'm singling out here. And another unfortunate point about the guitars is it's not just how they sound, but what exactly they're playing. Because this album is a real mixed bag, riff-wise. A lot of the riffing here is real stiff in the way both it's written and performed. A lot of it is quite recycled. This is the biggest point of similarity for me between this record and the Vengeance Falls record. Like that intro to Catastrophist, I can't believe no one is calling that out. It's fucking like, come on, man. Imagine if you listened to like a new band that had a demo that started like that. Just think about how you would evaluate it from that perspective. The Defiant is probably the most blatant one just because the band are, no one's called this out either. The band are literally playing like note for note 2008 Bullet for My Valentine. I swear to God, same exact harmonies, same exact chord progression, same drum feel when it switches up for the verses. It made me laugh the first time I heard it. I couldn't believe it. You have the complete non-riffing in the song Bleed Into Me that just takes up space. You have the, like that completely wasted section in the middle of Sickness Unto You where they do that tired old thrash chug that didn't work on Sever the Hand on the last record, but they're trying it again. This is a song that 2 minutes could have just been chopped right off and you would not miss it. You also have that really dull ending to Bending the Arc to Fear where it's like, oh, I didn't know we're doing scale runs as riffs now. Dun 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 dun. It's really, really tough to listen to. So the guitar tone and the riffs themselves end up being a pretty off-putting combination for me. Now we turn to the lead guitar, and I know I bitched a little bit about the lead playing on Sin the Sentence, but I gotta do it again because it's annoying me even more this time around. So first off, I don't think Matt Heafy should play solos anymore. He's a great vocalist, writes some great songs, but his lead playing has been stagnant this entire decade, if not longer. I could point to a lot of examples, but just skip to 2 minutes and 47 seconds into Amongst the Shadows for the guitar players watching at least. That like neck pickup triplet run that he's doing there, that is the same exact thing he's been doing since 2005. For lack of a better term, the same warm-up exercise that he's been shoving into solos for a decade and a half now. And I realize this is not something that will impact the majority of people's enjoyment of the music, but it really irks me. And this is my review, this is my perspective, so I'm just putting it out there. And for that reason, I don't want to elaborate on this too much, but for the guitarists and the theory geeks who are watching, because I know there's a substantial amount of you, the 3-string second inversion sweep arpeggios. For the rest of you, they sound like this. Those, it's the same fucking stale licks for Matt Heafy since 2005. On like every song. The most egregiously bad lead guitar moment on the album, which definitely showcases all of what I'm talking about in one moment, is if you go to Bending the Arc to Fear and you go to 3.5 minutes in, that'll tell you everything that I'm talking about in one quick little snippet. And I'm not a fan of these super excessive harmonies on Corey solos either, even though he's a much better player than Matt is. Why do these solos need to be so saturated with harmonies? That's my burning question. Are the band not confident that these licks and melodies can stand alone? Don't get me wrong, I love an epic harmonized solo more than the next guy, but when you throw harmonies on everything, the lead guitar as a separate emotional voice and as a separate piece of the musical puzzle, it kind of loses its personality and loses its flavor. And another note to that effect, when the band do specifically attempt the big, grand, harmonized solo as a separate piece of the song, the note choices themselves, unfortunately, are really dull and flat. I'm talking about the Defiant, about 2 minutes and 45 seconds into that one. I'm talking about the Ones We Leave Behind, about 3 minutes and 12 seconds, give or take. And again, a record like the Annihilator one I recently reviewed, or obviously Classic Maiden and Classic Priest, all the way up to Avenge, these types of moments, these big harmonized solos, account for some of my favorites in metal, period. So maybe it just hurts me more when they don't land, and Trivium do not land a single one on this album. But I guess one cool exception to all this negative talk about lead playing is the song Sickness Unto You. There's a part in the middle of that solo where the lightning fast arpeggios are being layered on top of really slow ones, and I think it's quite creative. So I realize that we spent a lot of time on the guitars here, which we kind of have to, because Trivium's sound is so guitar driven and Trivium's fan base is so guitar focused that any discussion around guitars can dominate a new album. But widening the scope here a little bit, the main thing, the big chunk of my critique that I just cannot get into with What the Dead Men Say is this substantial infusion of pop metal elements into the band's sound. And just be clear here, when I say pop metal, I'm not referring to a specific codified subgenre of metal like some people might refer to Winger as pop metal. More referring to just really blatantly accessible and simple elements that are usually tricks of the trade of pop bands just being squeezed into the metal sound. Interestingly enough though, there were traces of this on Send the Sentence. Like think back to that little intro on Beauty and the Sorrow, the first part of the Revoncus verses before the song gets complex. Think back to, obviously, Endless Night is the most blatant one, Wretchedness and Sighs, another example. So this was starting to creep into the band's sound, but it wasn't nearly as prevalent as it is here. Obviously, I've already pointed to The Defiant as an example of Trivium weirdly playing like 2008 era Bullet for My Valentine, note for note. That's really strange to hear, first off, but second, it also helps my argument because that chord progression is that same 3-chord progression that Bullet always used. And then Trivium actually reused essentially that same progression on Scattering the Ashes. And it gives it a real like kiddie metal feel. Skip to about 1 minute and 5 seconds into Scattering if you want to hear what I'm talking about. Also, the first half of the Catastrophist verses, I'm not crazy about that. Gives it a real butt rock feel to me. And then of course, the Motherlode here, which basically embodies everything I'm talking about in one song, is Bleed Into Me. You have like the pop punk influenced guitars, the way they're accented, and it's not used in an interesting way like it might have been on, say, Avenged Sevenfold's Second Heartbeat. You have the really dumbed down chord progression. You have some overly melodramatic vocals. It's tough for me to get through. And I will say here, for the second album in a row now, I like to see this band attempting ballads. I think it's an admirable thing to do, but it can be a difficult thing to pull off. It really can. I think what might have helped this song is maybe some layers of clean acoustic guitars, give it a little more dynamics. Think maybe the middle section of Shogun, the title track, something like that. Because when you have power chords pounding out those simple progressions, it starts to feel very butt rock very quickly. And of all the reactions to this album, that's what's the most weird to me, is that people don't seem to be picking up on the fact that this is the band's least aggressive album in their catalog, besides Silence in the Snow. We could have maybe a pissing contest about The Crusade, but I think The Crusade is much more aggressive than this. Remember, just because the band are throwing blast beats underneath everything doesn't automatically make it extreme. Quite the opposite, actually. Sometimes it highlights how not extreme it is. The one song on this album that I really, really love, though, is Amongst the Shadows and the Stones. This song is fucking relentless. It's got an excellent vocal performance from Matt Heafy, both on the harsh and the clean vocal side of things. But what's most impressive about this song is how structurally it so effortlessly just flips the Trivium formula on its head. I love the scream vocal chorus with the cymbal grabs, and I love the way this song just surprises me in its format. That is the true joy of this song, and it's just such a breath of fresh air in the middle of this track list. I also need to take a quick moment here to compliment drummer Alex Bent, who just crushes his performances on this record. In general, the issue with this record is not really a performances one from anybody, but more of a songwriting one. But Alex in particular, I love all of his drum fills. I love some of his more unconventional groove choices. I think that he is far and away the best drummer that this band has ever had, and it shows again on this record. And of course, as a longtime Trivium listener, I do love parts of songs. The final chorus, The Catastrophist, is real epic. I think the title track has some of the best riffing on the album, particularly the pre-chorus in that song. The extreme metal elements in Sickness Unto You and Bang the Arc to Fear are really enjoyable. The Defiant, the chorus in that song is just a triumphant, shining mid-album moment. So, do I get why people are liking this album? Yeah, I do, I guess. Maybe it's the fact that I've been listening to Trivium for so long and know the band so well that it makes me more vigilant and more critical. But I just, for the life of me, I can't understand why no credible publications are calling out the stuff that I'm seeing. Are we listening to the same album? It's just pretty glaring from where I'm sitting. But hey, I guess, we all have separate ears. We all hear different things. And I may warm up to this album over time, because that is what happened to a certain extent with me and Vengeance Falls. It went from something I slightly disliked to something I'm kind of indifferent on over the years. But at this point, discography-wise, I'd say that Silence in the Snow ranks as my least favorite Trivium album. And What the Dead Men Say is just below Vengeance Falls. So it's my second least favorite. This album suffers greatly from some weak riff writing, from some overbearing and ill-advised pop metal elements. It suffers from a lack of coherent direction, with elements that are within songs not necessarily belonging together, let alone when you widen out to the track list, songs like Bleed Into Me and Shadows and Stones not really belonging on the same album. I love versatility, I love ambition, I love hearing disparate elements coexist on an album, but I think with this one, Trivium would have benefited from having a more specific and focused creative direction, kind of one thing they were going to hone in on, ironically, like they had on Silence in the Snow. I think it would have helped them, instead of trying to do everything at once. So I know everyone seemingly loves this album. The Trivium stands are out in full force supporting this band, which is wonderful to see, but I do not share your enthusiasm at all. What the Dead Men Say gets a 4 out of 10 from me. As always, thank you so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed this video and are not yet subscribed to my channel, please consider doing so by clicking right over here, as well as checking out any of the other rock or metal related content that I publish here on a weekly basis. I really appreciate you watching, liking, disliking, just engaging in any fashion. Twitter, Instagram handle @RyanPannyMusic. Again, thank you so much for watching, guys, and I will see you soon.